Hello and welcome to the Whitehall Sources podcast, where we take you inside politics at Westminster, down Whitehall and beyond. I'm Calum Macdonald. Hello. Also on the podcast, Kirsty Buchanan, who was a special advisor to the Prime Minister, Theresa May. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello to you.
How's your lunch?
It's a bit spicy, actually, I'm not going to lie. So I'm not sure how far I'm going to get in it, but it's nice.
Good. Glad you're enjoying it. Joe Tanner's a political strategist who advises politicians from all political parties. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Fresh from Nashville.
Actually, I should say y'all. How y'all doing? I can't perfect it.
Gosh, it's like you're from Nashville.
Oh, yeah. Fitted in really well. My head feels a bit cold because I've finally taken the cowboy hat off. Anyway.
Go on, sing us a bit of Dolly.
There was no Dolly whatsoever, but I will tell you one very funny story is that we thought we saw George Jones, who I'd never heard of, actually. We thought we saw him going into a hotel.
Who is George Jones?
Exactly. He was like around, Johnny Cash time and all this, country singer. So I said, while on a tour, we saw George Jones earlier because I was convinced after seeing the picture of him in the Johnny Cash Museum. Turns out he died several years ago, and all the people on the tour thought I was mad because I was convinced I'd seen him.
No.
Well, I'm such a political nerd that the only George Jones I've ever heard of is the George Jones who used to be the political editor of the Daily Telegraph.
Yes, indeed.
And was such a notorious byline bandit that Brendan Carlin, who used to work with him, said at one point, he said it got so bad that he was thinking of changing his name by deed poll to and Brendan Carlin.
That is excellent.
Yes.
Well, so you didn't see George Jones, but you did have a lovely time. That's
I told
good.
everyone that I did.
Quite right too. Well,
So, yeah.
why let the truth get in the way of a good story, as we like to say. Right, on the podcast today, the government announces an overhaul of the benefit system. Will the government make the impact that's needed? Plus, President Trump and President Putin negotiate over the heads of Ukraine, although President Zelensky is due to speak to Trump today. We're recording on Wednesday, the 19th of March. We'll consider where this leaves Sir Keir Starmer and his coalition of the willing in Europe. You can watch all of this on YouTube. Search for Whitehall Sources. We upload clips and full episodes for you to enjoy there. Head to YouTube, just search for Whitehall Sources. You can also follow us on X, watch our clips on TikTok, and subscribe to our mailing list at whitehallsources.com. And as you're listening, drop us a WhatsApp. What do you think of what is being said? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you want to offer some experience or analysis? The number to WhatsApp is 0333 404 6507 and start your message with the word Whitehall. Right, let's get cracking with welfare, shall we? Ahead of the Chancellor's spring statement, which comes next week, Sir Keir Starmer's facing tough questions about Labour's economic policies as a whole. He's being challenged particularly over the government's planned welfare cuts, combined with employer tax rises and national insurance, which will take effect next month after the budget in October. £5 billion in savings have been announced by the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall this week. They'll be achieved primarily through changes to personal independence payment, that's PIP eligibility, and additional savings will come from a reduction to universal credit health element. Where to start with this? Joe, shall I come to you first on this? The rising benefits bill, Sir Keir Starmer's described it today as devastating for public finances, that it's wreaked a terrible human cost. He's been defending the quite drastic changes to the welfare system. Is his defence working? What do you make of what we've heard this week?
I don't like it. And I think there is definitely something that's needed to be done around the welfare bill. But at the same time, there's supposed to be a massive care review going on. And they are things that are completely linked. The ability for individuals to manage when they have got conditions is highly dependent on the support that they have access to. And it's not always about money. It's about people that can help you. It's about things that can be in your home that can help you. It's about support you can get if you're going to be in work. And so my worry is I think everyone's agreed that the welfare bill needs to be looked at and the makeup of it, how it is sort of how that money is distributed and to whom and why and for how long. I agree with the principle, but having had a lifetime of being on the other side of living with someone, my mum is significantly disabled with a condition she'll never recover from. She has MS. I know what it's like to be on the other side of having that big form arrive that wants to go through every inch of your life and ask you lots of questions. That is incredibly intimidating. It's very scary. There's very little resource out there. And when you start getting into the realms of people that have particularly impaired cognitive functions, that form is a nightmare. And so the process for me and the wider reform is not happening. It's just about saving money. And while I get the principle of needing to save money, I'm not sure this is necessarily all being done in the right way. So I think the message is, the message therefore is this sort of slightly scary one about lots of things being cut, which will terrify people. And quite rightly, if they can get the process right, they can potentially help encourage and support people back into work who might have been written off by the system. But at the same time, it's an incredibly terrifying cliff edge that some people will be facing that I think they've got to manage very, very carefully.
Yeah. Kirsty, in terms of what's been announced, I suppose the big question and the big debate right now is, can you see the merit in it? The principle of the thing, as Joe's alluding to, money needs saved, the welfare bill is on track to balloon and to grow massively. Is this the right way to save what, in the grand scheme of the welfare bill, sounds like quite a small amount of money?
Do I see the merit in it? Yes, I do. We have 9 million adults who are economically inactive at the moment, 3 million of which are on long-term disability benefits, and 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in education, employment or training. The benefits bill is ballooning and it is not sustainable. Is this the right way to fix it? The very simple answer is no. I'm not entirely sure it is. And what I'm slightly struggling with here is what outcome they are pursuing. Is the outcome that they are pursuing is to reduce the overall burden of it because it is not sustainable, because we need more money for other priorities, defence for argument's sake? Or is it genuinely, as Liz Kendall was saying yesterday, including to you, Calum, on Times Radio, that actually this is really all about improving people's mental health, because nothing does more for your mental health than being in a job? To which I probably would respond, well, I suppose it depends what kind of job you're in, really. I can think of plenty of jobs that will do nothing but have a deleterious effect on someone's mental well-being. So I think I struggle with it from that point of view. And when I was political editor at the Sunday Express, we ran a campaign while I was there to get parity between mental health in the workplace and physical health. And I was really struck yesterday, Calum, by the interview you had with Liz Kendall. And he said, well, in essence, Wes Streeting, the health secretary, thinks that there's an overdiagnosis of mental health amongst the young. Kind of, do you agree? To which she said, no, I think these are, sort of legitimate. It's down to a kind of multiplicity of factors, COVID being one of them, social media being another. To which I kind of want to say, if that's genuinely what you believe, then what does that say to young people? Speak out about your mental health. It is now, recognised in law as being, on a par with physical well-being. But when you do, we'll basically reply to that by cutting your benefits.
Yeah.
It's a very kind of peculiar way of going around it. The other thing that I'm really struggling with this is if, again, it's an outcome point, if the outcome is to get people into work, we have something like 800,000 vacancies. What little information we do get from the Green Paper, and frankly, I think it's shocking that they put this out yesterday without having the impact assessment, so that we can't have a proper conversation. I heard the Work and Pension Secretary saying, we need to wait for the Independent Office of Budget Responsibilities statement next week, the spring statement on March the 26th. Utter balls. You haven't come up with a figure of 5 billion unless you've done your own impact assessment. How on earth can we have a conversation about who this impacts and where and how unless we can see those impact assessments? So I think that was one thing I want to pick up on. But it says in there that it wants to get 2 million people back into employment. Well, unless my maths ain't mathing, as they say, if you've got 800,000 vacancies and you've got 2 million people you want to get back into work, you need businesses to create another 1.2 million jobs, right? Now, I didn't do very well at maths, but as far as I can work out, that is the long and the short of it. Yeah. Well, at the same time as you're saying to everyone, it's great for your mental health to be in work, what have you done to employers right now? You're slapping, jobs tax on all employers from April, which is going to mean that rather than having kind of more jobs being created, you're going to have recruitment freezes and people being, their jobs being lost. At the same time, you're adding to the burden of employers around workers' rights. Now, regardless of whether you think that's right or wrong, that adds another burden to employers at the same time as you want to drive them. So this feels slightly like a cart before a horse. If you genuinely think this is about improving mental well-being, well, then let's get the economy right before we go for the welfare reform. This seems to be kind of, A over T for me in terms of the sequential
and what
nature
news
of
did
it.
we get? What news did we get? Santander closing a load of branches. They're saying 800 jobs lost there. Like, we're getting these announcements. We've had a load of retailers that have talked about job losses as well. So you're absolutely right about where the jobs are. But also, there is an expense to government to actually provide the right support. This isn't just about cutting people's benefits to make them work. It's about providing a runway for people to get jobs and be in work. If you've been off work for a considerable amount of time, you need a hell of a lot of support to be able to get back into the workforce. And that is a challenge. That isn't something you just get up one day and say, right, tomorrow I'm going to get a job and I'm going to participate fully. There is a runway for that process. There are people that are living with conditions that are going back to work after cancer, that are going back off to work after treatments. There are adjustments that employers need to make, which means that to Kirsty's point, when you haven't got a lot of vacancies, that also means that employers can be pretty choosy about who they do employ. And if someone, quite frankly, let's be really real about this, if somebody out there has been out of work for a considerable amount of time, and then you have that candidate next to somebody who's literally still in employment and looking to change jobs, which one are you going to go for? So what is the government going to do to incentivise people to create jobs or to employ people that are coming into the workforce after being on long-term sick?
I saw one think tank in response yesterday suggesting that employers that are welcoming to the idea of people coming in after being out of work should get a national insurance holiday. They should not have to pay employers' national insurance contributions as a way of tying all of that together. Kirsty?
Well, nice in fantasy land, but, Joe is right. We are in a jobs market at the moment where employers are very risk averse. And, I'm not sure that a small subsidy in terms of that is going to really shift the dial. Look, I've been in employment areas where I've seen people struggle to accommodate even neurodivergence. The idea that we have a truly accessible working environment right now, regardless of the nature of the disability or illness, is for the birds, frankly. And that's before you get to the other macro trend that, we haven't picked up on yet, which is AI. Now, over the next 2 or 3 years, what we'll find is that increasingly, on top of being driven there by a jobs tax, employers will look more and more to make cost savings by letting go of more and more people and having AI perform some of those white-collar functions. And another thing that kind of struck me about this is it's the wrong prescription for the problem, if you like. Mental health is caused by a multiplicity of things. I'm not sure that just getting a kind of entry-level job is going to solve all those. And so what have we seen this week? We've seen everybody talking about welfare reform. We've also seen everyone talk about the anniversary of COVID, which I think is very important when you're talking about the young generation. And we've seen that incredible drama, Adolescence. Now, I don't know if you've seen that. Joe, probably you won't because you've been yee-hawing and line dancing in Nashville. But like everybody else, I can say, brace yourself and watch it because it's
astonishing.
It is quite something. And what do they all have in common? Well, they all have in common kind of social media and the impact of social media. And I hate to get out this old drum again. But, there is no mistaking the fact that we've had this exponential rise in mental health problems amongst the young, which coincides with, one, A, being part of the lockdown generation, and two, having an exponential rise in access to smartphones. So, on the one hand, it's a real kind of push me, pull you policy. So we're going to push people back into work, but it'll be difficult for you to get a job because we've ladened all these extra costs and burdens on employment. And we won't do some of even the most basic things in terms of tackling one of the biggest root causes of youth mental health problems, which is social media. We had the education bill come back this week. The Tories, who could have, by the way, and also didn't, put forward an amendment for the bill to say that smartphones should be banned in schools, just for a mandatory ban. Now, these sorts of things, the things that we've discussed on the pod before, increasing the age of consent from 13 to 16, smartphone bans. Let's look at some of the root causes. I don't know, again, from this lack of information we've had around this green paper, what are we saying is the root cause of this? Are we really saying it's overdiagnosis? Is that what the government is saying? If that is genuinely its position, where is the evidence for that? And if it's not, and as Liz Kendall says, it's legitimate, then do we really think that just putting people in entry-level jobs is the solution to the complexities of these problems?
Shall we turn to some of the other politics around this then? And, I think the argument from the government's point of view, having spoken to Liz Kendall yesterday and, heard ad nauseum, is that they think there are too many people out of work, they're trying to get people into work, and so tweaking, adjusting these reforms in the welfare system, they think are the push factor for that. But within the Labour Party, there's a real feeling of discontent. I mean, name an MP, and we could pick any number of them. But Diane Abbott says these welfare reforms are, quote, not about morality, but about the Treasury's wish to balance the country's books on the backs of the most vulnerable and poor people in this society. Joe, there's resistance, certainly. Could there be a rebellion? There will be a vote on aspects of this, certainly, and so we could see something of a Labour rebellion. What do you think about the reaction within the Parliamentary Labour Party?
Yeah, I mean, I think we already saw it was muted over the winter fuel payments, but it was there. And I think in reality, there will be plenty of people that will not like this and will feel very uncomfortable. And again, I think the PR of this, the approach that they've taken by coming up with a number of potential savings and they've almost decided, well, we've looked at the books and we think this bunch of people are, I don't know.
Gaming the system, basically.
Well, or, scroungers or whatever it is, the sort of terminology that gets thrown around, which I find really uncomfortable. The reality is that these are going to be people that will be sending their stories to their local MPs. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very, very complicated. There are, there are millions of unpaid carers. You look at what Carers UK put out every year. There are people for whom they have a responsibility that they are sort of propping up somebody else in their lives. And those people sort of do it because they understand they don't qualify for all of the payments. They don't qualify in the system, but they do it because it's the person they love and they care about. But when the system then starts changing, it also then affects human behaviour and how people will interact with that system, and whether there's the potential for a bunch of people that do this thing out of the goodness of their heart saying, well, sod it, why am I going to? Why isn't the system doing more for me? And actually, if you're going to look at assessing us more, well, I'm not going to say that I do all these things I currently do. I'm not going to take those on anymore. I'm going to make sure that we have a chance to get the system to pay for it instead. Or you get people that, quite frankly, feel like, oh, so they've already decided about me, have they? And that's going to be the attitude that then these aggressive emails will probably come into MPs saying, but, I clearly am one of those people. I'm off because I've been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And you're now saying that, this is just a misdiagnosis, are you? And they're going to quote that Wes Streeting stuff from the weekend. And, I've talked publicly about my son having serious mental health challenges in the past. And it is not easy. It is really, really tough. And I go back to the point that then if you can't access the systems, the services that are supposed to support you, that condition gets worse. It doesn't get better because you're a mum like me who is literally dancing on a pin, trying to work out what to do for the best, not knowing if you're making it worse or better on a daily basis because you've got no one else to help you. So I just think the politics of kind of coming up with a number and putting it out there. We always talk about rolling the pitch is the right thing to do, but I'm not sure the pitch has been rolled right on this one, because I think that the ability for a bunch of MPs now to have the ammo next week, when stuff is more formally, more rounded, when everything's put together more, I think you're just going to have every MP is going to be able to stand up and quote a constituent that they're worried about. And that is going to be difficult, because the one thing we know in politics is if you've got a difficult thing to talk about, what you do is you talk about a human story. And there are human stories up and down the country that are going to be in a difficult position on this stuff. So again, while the bill has got to come down, I think the language about some of this stuff can be really bad. And I think people can be really lazy with responses to questions and the way that they talk about people. And these are real people with really genuine problems. And even if that problem is that, you can't do as much as you, maybe you think you can't do as much as you can do, you should be able to do more, who knows? But you need support, and the support currently isn't there.
To Joe's point, I speak as someone that worked all the way through kind of cancer and chemo, with a couple of notable exceptions straight after surgery. But to the point about how complex this can be, I have had my own mental health problems, and there have been periods in my life where I absolutely could not work, was not fit for work, not because of a physical condition, but because of my mental well-being. So Joe's 100% right about that. Look, the politics of this is there will be a rebellion. It will pass because the Conservatives will support it and because the size of the majority is vast and huge. So when we finally get there, and we're a ways off, this is a green paper, it's a consultation, we won't get to kind of bill till next year. So it will pass. The Tories obviously think that it's fine in as much as it is, but it doesn't go far enough. Well, right back at you you had 14 years to get there yourself. The benefits building balloon over the last 8 months. So I do kind of at least applaud the attempt to tackle what is clearly a growing problem. And I also think Joe's right about the sequencing of this. If this all has kind of echoes in some ways about, the George Osborne era, universal credit in Duncan Smith's incentivising work to pay, and Conservatives arguing again and again. There is nothing compassionate about leaving people on benefit for generation after generation. But when they first came in 2010, they rolled this pitch for about a year before we got any kind of legislation from them in the roll-up to universal credit. So we were all kind of primed into this framework that it is not compassionate to leave people on welfare. And in some cases, in most cases, you'd like to think that is probably true. Of course, there are many people that won't be able to work. And having just battled my way through a pit form on behalf of my son, I know that this isn't as easy as it seems. So there will be people that won't be able to work. It will go through. Having said all this, who will really benefit from this? Because what I hear again and again and again is people saying, the Labour Party are behaving just like the Tories. Well, who will benefit from this? Reform. Mm-hmm. But it does strike me, though, one thing it did, and I'm saying this to a friend of mine this morning, what we've got at the moment is a kind of splintering of the right. But we have a Labour Party at the moment which is increasingly being seen, to all intents and purposes, as the Conservatives from a section on the left, right? Because it has to grapple with all the kind of same complexities and trade-offs and least worst options that all governments, centrist governments, have to grapple with. And the trouble with a kind of centrist government is you don't tend to please anybody. And as you get a much more polarised society. So I thought about, what would happen? Now, bear in mind, you've got, 4 now reform voters. So it is capable in this very volatile mix of a political establishment we have now, even with first past the post, to get, these ingenue fledgling parties into Parliament. We've got Gaza MPs, effectively, who crystallised around the issue of Gaza and also got into Parliament last year. We forget a lot about them, but they are there, and they are there in the same numbers, I think, slightly more now than Reform. What would happen if you got a very charismatic figure from the left, a sort of Mick Lynch, for argument's sake, who created a kind of socialist party for Parliament and stood on a truly left-wing platform and said, the difference between the Conservatives and Labour is cigarette paper stuff. And so you'd have, a split on either side, and you'd have that vote split on either side. Now, I'm not saying that this will happen, but it does seem to me there's a huge vacuum on the left of the party now that is ripe for someone to sort of move into and crystallise round either a campaign or actually a kind of proper parliamentary party.
But you're saying, Kirsty, it won't happen. But actually, given the group that got suspended before, I mean, they were suspended for a significant amount of time from the Labour whip. So you can easily see a situation where there's a rebelling over something like this, and that group form, and actually it's a more sizable group. And then it's a case of, well, what do the government do? Then if they're people that actually hold positions, then they are then, resigning from government over this, which gives it a bit more impetus. So, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, really, because we always said that this was the challenge. Everyone says, oh, big majority, isn't it great? But actually what it does is, because you realise that you can end up not being in a job quite easily, and, there's no job available for you, you don't fit with the party's sort of mould or view anymore because you are more left-wing, then the sort of desire or the attraction of joining with people that are more like-minded, and therefore a group that you feel you can speak out on issues, it potentially becomes significantly compelling.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was listening to Richard Bergen on radio the other day, who's only just been let back into the Labour Party after rebelling over some other, I think it was the child benefit, limiting child benefit to two people, which they inherited from the Conservatives. And you don't necessarily have to be from the left of the party either. I think there are plenty of Labour MPs who are very uncomfortable with the idea of being elected for what they thought a Labour Party would deliver, to find out that the targets that they've got most in their sights at the moment so far have been children, pensioners, and now the disabled and the sick. It's not a very comfortable platform for a lot of Labour MPs, regardless of where you are on that spectrum. And if you're fighting in kind of ultra-marginal seats, and you'll hear Labour MPs say this all the time, people still come up on the street and talk about the winter fuel allowance. And if we're talking about the benefits bill, let's be honest about, again, I heard Liz Kendall saying, oh, we've got an increasingly ageing population, and, a lot of the ageing population will have a multiplicity of health problems. All true, fine. Why are you going after, the disabilities of the young then? Why is the triple lock still sacrosanct with a ballooning bill and an increasingly ageing population? So the decisions that they've made, not that we can really interrogate them because we don't have the information that we should have to be able to interrogate them fully, are curious to me, and I'm struggling with the logic of them.
In a few minutes on this podcast, we'll welcome Amanda Martin, Labour MP for Portsmouth North. She's part of our Campaigning MPs series. She'll be discussing her bill on the theft of tools of trade. So stay with us for that. Just ahead of that, though, I want to ask you guys, have you seen or heard Torsten Bell speaking for the government on Newsnight with Victoria Derbyshire just last night?
Yes.
Yeah. If you haven't seen or heard it, here it is. I'm not sure that sold the reforms the way the government might want them to be sold. Is that fair to say, Joe?
And that is exactly the point. Victoria Derbyshire, I don't know whether her numbers were accurate or not. You know, you can argue that did they count something wrong or whatever, and Torsten's obviously trying to do that a bit with saying about other benefits. But the reality of this, as I sort of pointed out at the start, this is all so complicated. You would struggle to go out there and find one individual for whom it's really simple to work out how much money they get, how much money they should get, how much money they shouldn't get, and what they're left with. Like, it's just so complicated. And I find it, I mean, it makes me angry because I sat on the end of a phone call where I was told that my mum's care package was going to be ended pretty much overnight because of a funding system that was changing. And my mum needs help getting in and out of bed. She needs help with washing. She can't do really much for herself at all. And I remember going to party conference. I was going to Tory party conference. I didn't know if I could leave because I didn't know if I'd have carers coming in. And, you know, within this mix of stuff, that we're talking there about a 21-year-old, you know, who is in one position. But what about, again, those people who are the individuals that support other people who then might have to give up their job because they've got to carry on looking after someone? We could end up with more people out of work because of a situation where they feel via the benefit system that that person they love isn't going to get enough support. So, yeah, it was not the way to sell it at all.
And in further sales pitch masterclasses, Kirsty, the Minister of State for Social Security and Disability, Stephen Timms, was on Times Radio this morning. And guess what he didn't do? He didn't rule out further benefit cuts in the future. He said, who knows what will happen in the next 5 years? So that's good and reassuring for everyone who's watching their benefits disappear up the chimney in a cloud of smoke.
Well, look, Torsten Bell went full on Alan Bastard there for a minute. We're like, I've got a mortgage to pay. Well, lucky you, Torsten.
Well done you for owning it somewhere.
Do you know what? The more I the older I get, the more I just don't understand why Gen Z don't just down tools completely. You know, we've burnt their planet. We've burdened them with an unfathomable national debt for a furlough scheme so that we could lock them away from a disease that doesn't really impact on them, never really impacted on them particularly. If they've got kind of graduate jobs, AI is coming for those kind of white-collar jobs. If they are going into kind of blue-collar trades, sort of mass immigration has depressed their wages. The triple lock is sanct, but, you know, if you're young and you're disabled, we're coming for your welfare benefits. And if you work really, really, really hard and you pay off the national debt, the education debt and stuff, if you're really lucky, you might be able to afford a house by the age of like 50. It's insane. And they wonder why people are decoupling from, you know, standard parliamentary democracy, from capitalism, in fact, as something that works for them, and increasingly going for extremist parties, extremist solutions, or the kind of the lure of the populist right. Because if you're being lectured by someone about, oh no, I couldn't live on £70 a week, I have a mortgage to pay.
A fat mortgage to pay.
I've got a fat mortgage to pay. My wife needs to shop at Waitrose. I mean, and they wonder why people are, you know, why Gen Z is so angry and depressed. How could you not be? And then, you know, if you want to sort of relax, you go on social media where all those conspiracy theories and everything you think about the world is all, you know, writ large. Just, you know, madness.
Would love your thoughts on this, or your experiences indeed. If you have had experience with the benefit system, if you think at this point that your experience is about to change, or your benefits entitlements about to change, WhatsApp us for free. The number is 0333 404 6507. Or you can email us, and the email address is hello@whitehallsources.com. Coming up then in the next couple of minutes, Amanda Martin, Labour MP, tells us why she has brought forward a bill on the theft of tools of trade. Stay with us. This is Whitehall Sources. Let's turn now to a campaigning MP. We do this periodically on the Whitehall Sources podcast to try to bring an understanding of what MPs do in Parliament and how they take action on your behalf. The theft of tools of trade sentencing bill has been tabled by Amanda Martin, MP for Portsmouth North. It aims to impose harsher sentencing for tool thieves. Research from On the Tools has found that an alarming 3 in 4 tradespeople in the UK say they've had their tools stolen before, and as many as a quarter report it happening 3 times or more. The bill's due for its second reading in April, and Amanda Martin is with us on the podcast. Hello, Amanda.
Hi, Calum.
It's really good to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So I've mentioned a bit about the bill. What does it propose? What's its purpose?
So essentially, as you've just described, tool theft is actually rife in this country. 1 in 3 are expected to have their tools stolen, but also not just once, 2, 3, 4 times. And although there have been various attempts to mark up tools, to equip vans better, the tools are still being stolen. And so there could have been there are so many measures we could take to sort of change this. But one of the things I want to do is concentrate specifically on the sentencing element. So what my bill would aim to do would be to change the sentencing level. So every time a crime is committed and it goes into court, a sentencing guideline is set as to how much, whether it's community service or a custodial sentence, and there's a framework and a guidance around that. And at the moment, and they're done on like a letter and a number category. So we've got the culpability category, which is a letter A, B, or C, and then we've got the harm category, which is the financial losses. So the culpability category, basically, A is the harshest. So anyone who is organising that crime or threatening other people to do that crime would be in A. And category C is the lowest, which is if you are somebody that's coerced into crime. And everything else sits in B. So that's the culpability rating. So tool theft essentially sits in category B. And then the harm category is done with the harm of the financial loss. And they are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. But 1 is for very high value of stolen goods, so anything over £100,000. And 2 covers theft between £10,000 and £100,000, and then category 3 is theft from £500 to £10,000. So most tool bills are between would be number 3. They would come in under 3 because they're between £500 and £10,000. Because at the moment it's only counted as the tool loss, as opposed to the full financial losses, which would be the repair of the van, the replacement of the tools, the loss of work. So if someone comes down to go to work on a job for the week, and their tools are stolen, they are therefore out of work until such times as they can get their insurance recovered or they can replace them. So to me, if we just simply changed it to losses, and we included all of those, we could raise the harm level to a category B. What would that mean? In real life, that would therefore mean, instead of which is currently the sentencing guidelines is a recommendation of 36 weeks community service, it would carry a recommendation of 1 year custodial sentence. So therefore deterring criminals from committing the offence and also from recommitting the offence as well. And when I've heard from people, I mean, one man caught somebody stealing their tools and he just looked at them as if to say, what are you going to do about it? And what can you do about it? And I think it's really the impact of that loss and the mental health loss on it. I mean, we've heard from people that, it's really affected them. It makes them really angry. They don't feel that there's enough justice done, and puts them out of work, and it's their livelihood. So that's our campaign. And obviously there are other things around that there wouldn't be a trade for stolen goods if people didn't buy them, if people didn't sell them on places like Marketplace, if people didn't sell them down the pub in car boot sales. So it's really about raising public awareness that buying that drill, buying that set of tools is actually someone's livelihood at the end of the day. But actually what we're wanting to do is to make the justice system fit the crime.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because there's sort of several elements, I think, to what you've said, from tracking them, as you've mentioned, which I think was something that was included in the Equipment Theft Prevention Act from 2023. Yes. But I don't know if that's actually made it all the way through the various processes which it needs to. So that's something that perhaps needs signed off as well around now at this point, you might think. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think various governments, various ministers have paid, I don't know, I would say lip service to this and tried to do things. And we could have done a whole range of things. But for me, yes, we should stop the tool theft in the first place, but it is still happening. And until we put the punishment to fit the crime, actually, it's not we need to attack it at both ends, because all that is okay to be preventative, but all of the time while this crime is being committed, we absolutely need to make sure that the justice is done for people, because it's ruining people's lives.
Yeah. And then the other part of it is the public responsibility. So it's not buying tools at a car boot sale, for example. That's the sort of thing we're talking about, isn't it? Because I might sit here, I mean, as somebody who's got very limited DIY ability anyway, and think, right, hang on a second, I have no connection to this at all. But it's when you're wandering around and there might be a kind of second-hand market for tools that we need to be alert to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've heard people say, well, people should empty their tools out of their vans. Absolutely not. You should absolutely be entitled to park your van locked, alarmed, outside your house or outside your place of work and not get tools stolen. And then there's the other thing of people actually getting their tools nicked while they're on the job as well. Yeah. So having to lock up their van every time, and then they're back and forwards getting other bits of tools. But to me, it's about extending what that loss is. It's not just about the financial value of those tools lost. That's bad enough.
Which is itself thousands of pounds, isn't it?
Yeah,
at a
that's
time.
bad enough in itself. And how on earth do you repeatedly save up and buy that? And you have to put yourself into debt. It's costing you the loss of work. There's also a further issue around, we've worked with On the Tools and tool van theft, who I got involved with right at the beginning. He's from Portsmouth, and it's sort of a non-for-profit that have been trying to raise awareness. In talking to police constabularies across the country, they also register tool theft in various ways. So it could be organised crime, because I know in my city last summer we had organised crime where vans were coming in, smashing open work vans, stealing all the tools. It could be home stolen. It could be stolen from home. It could be stolen from the workplace. So there's a whole range. So although we already know that 1 in 3 will have their tools stolen, actually we think that's the tip of the iceberg, because I think people don't report it. It puts their insurance claims up, and it's just affecting people. And looking into this, I've been having a look at the construction industry. My dad was a plumber. My brother's an electrician. My uncles are builders. They've all had tools nicked from that point of time, as have so many other people that have contacted us. But we're also starting to look at the suicide rate in the construction industry is really high, because these things cost people work. It costs them their reputation. It costs them their livelihood. They're not able to pay their own bills, support their own family, let alone the people that, if they're running their own business that they're working for, that are working for them as well.
In terms of people who are listening to this, we mention our own responsibility. I suppose the other reaction to this will be, hang on a second, why does tool theft need a specific offence? Why does it need specific legislation? Why isn't this just considered the same as other types of theft-related crimes? Can you explain?
Yeah, well, I think it won't have its own sentencing. It will basically, what we would be doing is raising the level of loss, so the harm level in line with the actual crime. So it's not having its specific ruling. We have to be, in reality, it isn't a category 3, because between £500 and £10,000, that's the category 3. It actually moves into category 2 when you look at the work losses, when you look at the cancellation of jobs, when you look at the reputational damage, when you look at replacing those tools, when you look at your insurances going up, and actually fixing your van. Some of the thefts literally peel the doors off of vans off the side. It's like a tin opener. They just literally peel them off. So it isn't having its own specific. What it's doing is raising the harm level, the harm category, to actually represent in reality what that harm is causing.
And I think crucially, Amanda, in our conversations that we're having with MPs like yourself who are campaigning and leading on legislation like this, we like to get an understanding of the parliamentary process. So I mentioned it's due for its second reading in April. That suggests there's a certain degree of parliamentary support, actually, for what you're trying to do. So help us understand where it's at and where it needs to get to.
Okay, yeah, so there are very many ways in this very old traditional place that you can move bills, that you can have debates. I'd already had a Westminster Hall debate on elevating the status of trade, so looking at apprenticeships, making sure that we can get people into these trades, because, everything you touch, a tradesperson has been involved in it. Other countries, America, the USA, Europe, call them craftspeople. They are treated with much more respect, much more of a gravitas of a profession than we do in this country. So I'd already done, had a look at that and looked at how we get people in. And then it began me to think, well, when they're in, what we're doing is we're setting them up to be, their tools to be next. We're getting people into these jobs. How are we going to support them once they're in the job? So there are private members' bills, which once a year they're pulled out of a hat, their selections to do from there, and wasn't successful in that. They only come out once a year, 600 odd MPs. The likelihood of having one of those is very slim. So I decided I couldn't wait another year because of looking at the impact this is having. So what you can do is called a 10-minute rule bill. So you stand up, you present the bill for the first reading. So I had a 10-minute rule bill that was presented. You then ask for a date for a second reading. There were no objections to it. So then we have a date of a second reading. Now that is set for the 25th of April. If by chance it doesn't get read or heard, then unfortunately it falls as a bill, because you can imagine in parliamentary time that's how it is. So what we've done alongside this is a petitions bill, so that we can have a petitions debate. So we've got a petition running. In old traditional parliamentary styles, it has to have wet signatures on it. So next Wednesday, I've got a parliamentary reception, which is being hosted by Checkatrade and On the Tools to promote the bill. We've got various famous DIY people coming along, various influencers to kind of really push the petition. And then we'll have the wet signatures signed for the people that are there on the day. And then what we can do is submit alongside the electronic version of the petition. And the more people that sign it, the more people that tell us their stories, the more we have the real life version, and people can see the extent that this crime is operating in our country. And also working alongside the police, if we can even get a category put in so that it's listed in one way, we can see the real extent of the crime, not just the anecdotal and the people that have signed. So we're working in that way. We have written to the minister in charge of the Justice Minister in charge of sentencing, and we are due to now write to the sentencing guidelines department. So they're separate to government. So we're now going to write and begin to work with them. So in the background, we're doing all of the things that even if this bill falls, we can move it to a petitions debate, and then we can move on to the next steps by actually working with the sentencing guidelines people.
That's really helpful, and it's really fascinating, and it's really good to speak to you, Amanda. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
This is the Whitehall Sources podcast. Let's just get a thought from Joe and Kirsty on the other, of course, dominating story of the week. At the time of recording, President Zelensky of Ukraine and Donald Trump are actually speaking on the phone. Because yesterday Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone and edged towards something of a conditional ceasefire in Ukraine, albeit with some really pretty outlandish, outrageous conditions attached by Vladimir Putin of Russia. Right, let's just get a thought. I think because the situation is moving regarding Zelensky and Trump, etc., this may all change, of course, but I think, Kirsty, I just want a thought on where Keir Starmer stands in all of this. He's been very passionate about the coalition of the willing and bringing European countries together in the interest of Ukraine. He says Ukraine must be at the heart of all of this. Yesterday, Ukraine was certainly not at the heart of any of this. Today, perhaps Zelensky's a bit closer to it. Where is Sir Keir Starmer, the bridge in all of this?
Collapsed. Look, overly, I'm not entirely sure it matters where Keir Starmer is, because whatever else Trump is or isn't listening to, I don't think it's Keir Starmer. We've had weeks and weeks of shuttle diplomacy, weeks and weeks and weeks of people banging on about the coalition of the willing. Nothing fundamentally has really changed. Putin won't accept anything that looks like, a kind of military backing to protect the sovereignty of Ukraine. Trump won't accept anything other than the facile argument that having US contractors on the ground is sufficient kind of security backdrop. And, I think the best case scenario that we've got right now, and this is the best case scenario that I can think of, is that Putin is making a chump out of Trump. That is the best case scenario. And the reason I say that is if Trump begins to feel that, then he might turn his arm twisting and his bully boy tactics on Putin. But I don't think that's what's going on here at all. I think what's going on here is exactly the same thing that happened in Afghanistan, is that the only thing that Trump cares about is not having to pay for somebody else's war. in the same way as the only thing he really cared about in Afghanistan was getting American troops home. So what he did was, a deal with the Taliban that removed the only things that were holding the Taliban in abeyance from the Afghanistan people. He then left office. Biden came in and we saw what happened. Taliban swept through the country far quicker than anyone had expected because there was nothing to prevent them from doing that anymore. And Biden got all the blame for that appalling, heartbreaking, disastrous exit strategy that we all saw unfold in the early days of the administration. I think the reality is I don't think Putin is making a chump out of Trump. I think that's what we hope is happening. I think what is actually happening is Putin wants out and he doesn't really care what happens to Ukraine as a consequence. And the idea that the European Union can get its act together with Britain and be able to fill that gap, well, we'll see. But I'm not holding out an awful lot of hope.
Joe, what's your take on where things are at?
Well, I mean, we do have this fundamental problem that Trump is wanting Europe to step up, but then Putin's saying he doesn't want Europe really involved. That there is a real challenge here about what's been understood the lines are or the guardrails are for any kind of deal. And so there is potentially a problem in that Keir Starmer could have been having this big discussion and got everybody halfway up the hill, and actually there's no further that anyone could go because it is such a hard line for Putin. Now, at some point, then Trump's got to make a decision, right? And either say, well, yeah, I agree with him over Europe's involvement, or he doesn't. And so everyone said that this would be the sort of dance that Putin would have, and that even if he agrees to something, he'd then sort of potentially change the goalposts anyway. The really awful thing is obviously that everyone has stepped up their aggression while this is happening, which is really worrying. So I think we'll know soon enough. It does feel that at least if this call is happening now, then I presume by tomorrow we'll all be waking up to a big announcement from Trump about what has or hasn't happened. The interesting thing is that if Putin doesn't give him anything, what Trump's spin will be on this, because Trump will want to spin this in some way. And of course, how aggressively will he go back at Putin if it falls apart? Or will he sort of try and keep the door open to a future conversation? We just don't know.
It's fast moving. It's moving even as we speak, but we'll keep you up to date with analysis on the podcast, of course. Kirsty and Joe, thank you both so much. Thanks for being on today. And our thanks also to Amanda for joining us on the podcast as well. You can watch all of us on YouTube if you like that sort of thing. Just search for Whitehall Sources, where you can get full episodes to enjoy. Head there for videos for updates. Follow us on X. Watch our clips on TikTok. And you can subscribe to our mailing list at whitehallsources.com. We'll drop back into your podcast feed this time next week. Thanks so much for listening.